Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be heading down south, all the way to Chile, to explore their pretty ambitious plan for tackling water security in the 21st century.
Sounds
Yeah,
fascinating.
so Chile's got this incredibly diverse geography, right? I mean, they've got the driest desert in the world, the Atacama, they've got massive glaciers and everything in between.
Yeah, it's a really unique landscape from a water management perspective.
Absolutely. So imagine trying to manage water across that kind of landscape.
Right, and then you add climate change into the mix, which is only making things more unpredictable and extreme.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Climate change is like adding fuel to the fire.
It really is. And to make things even more complicated, Chile is currently facing a 12-year mega drought.
Wow, 12 years. That's got to be tough.
It is. It's the longest drought in their recorded history.
And on top of the drought, I heard some regions are also experiencing some pretty intense flooding.
That's right. So it's like they're being squeezed from both sides, too little water in some places, too much in others.
So how on earth are they even starting to approach this issue? It seems incredibly complex.
Well, they actually have a pretty impressive track record when it comes to water management.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, they've achieved almost universal urban water coverage, and their rural water program has been a huge success, providing water to over 2 million people.
Okay, so they're not starting from scratch.
Exactly. They've got a good foundation to build on.
But it sounds like this mega drought and the floods are real game changers.
You got it. These unprecedented challenges have really exposed some vulnerabilities in their existing systems and highlighted the need for a whole new approach.
So is that where this national infrastructure plan comes in? The one we're going to be looking at today?
Yes, exactly. Officially, it's called the National Infrastructure Plan 2025-2055, or PNIP for short.
PNIP, got it.
It's a really long-term vision spanning 3 decades, laying out a roadmap for achieving water security in a way that's both sustainable and equitable.
I have to say, one of the things that really caught my eye about this plan is that it's not just about building more dams or these traditional infrastructure projects.
Right, it goes way beyond that.
It seems like they're taking a much more holistic, uh, comprehensive approach.
Absolutely. The PNIP goes beyond just physical infrastructure, including management measures and policy proposals, so it's really trying to tackle the issue from all angles.
So instead of just focusing on like moving water around, they're looking at the whole picture. You know, how people use water, how to protect those natural sources, and then, yes, building smarter infrastructure on top of all of that.
You got it. It's about managing water as a precious resource, not just trying to control it.
Right, and that brings us to this really interesting concept at the heart of the plan. Security with everyone, not just for everyone.
That's a crucial distinction.
It is. So what exactly does that mean? Security with everyone.
It means recognizing that water management isn't just the government's responsibility.
It's everyone's problem.
Exactly. It requires everyone, regulators, water users, local communities, businesses, everyone needs to be actively involved in working together.
That sounds great in theory, but how do they actually plan to make that happen?
Yeah.
Getting everyone on the same page, especially when it comes to something as essential as water, seems like a really tall order.
Well, there's this one quote from the report that I think sums it up perfectly.
Like, honest.
It says, "Everyone depends on the water cycle, and only together can we ensure its sustainability."
Powerful stuff.
They're really emphasizing this idea of shared responsibility.
Which makes a lot of sense, especially given how geographically diverse Chile is, right? Like you've got communities in the Atacama Desert facing completely different water challenges than folks living in the Andes Mountains.
Exactly. And this collaborative approach also recognizes that those old ways of simply extracting more and more water from rivers and aquifers, it's just not sustainable anymore.
Yeah, it's like that cake, take, take mentality just isn't going to cut it in the 21st century.
It's got to be about more than just adapting to a changing climate.
It's about actively recovering and conserving those water sources.
Precisely, ensuring a sustainable water balance for the entire country.
Now, earlier you mentioned that this plan is incredibly innovative.
Oh yeah, it's packed with new ideas.
Can you give us an example of what that looks like in practice?
Sure, one really interesting example is their focus on using treated wastewater for agriculture.
Oh, that's smart.
Instead of just discharging it back into the environment, they're seeing it as a valuable resource that can be used to irrigate crops.
Yeah, especially in a country facing water scarcity, that seems like a no-brainer.
It does, but it also requires a real shift in mindset and investment in the necessary infrastructure.
So are they actually putting their money where their mouth is?
It seems so. The PNIP recognizes this as a key priority.
It's good to hear they're not just talking about it.
And it's not just about wastewater either.
Oh, what else?
They're looking at things like desalination, rainwater harvesting, and improving irrigation efficiency.
It's a really multifaceted approach.
It is. They're really trying to think outside the box and come up with solutions that are tailored to their specific challenges.
It's like they're building a custom toolbox filled with all these different water management strategies, and they're ready to use whichever tool is best suited for the job.
That's a great analogy.
So we've got this collaborative approach, a focus on innovation, and a recognition that flexibility is key. But let's be honest, all of this sounds pretty expensive.
It is, and the report doesn't shy away from that.
So the million-dollar question, or maybe billion-dollar question in this case, is how are they going to pay for all of this? I mean, we're talking about a 30-year plan with some pretty ambitious goals.
Well, that's what we're going to dive into next.
Okay, then let's move on to part 2 of this deep dive and find out how Chile plans to turn this ambitious vision into a reality. All right, so we've talked about Chile's water situation and how this new national plan is trying to address it. But as we all know, even the best plans need the funds to back them up.
Right. That's always the big question, isn't it? How to make these grand ideas a reality.
Especially when we're talking about something as large-scale and long-term as this 30-year plan.
Exactly. And the report itself acknowledges that securing enough funding is a major challenge for implementing these innovative water management solutions.
Yeah, that's not really a surprise. I mean, these big forward-thinking plans always seem to hit a wall when it comes to the money part.
It's true. And Chile's existing setup with all these different institutions and regulations that aren't really working together effectively, it's not making things any easier.
So they need a way to incentivize sustainable water use and not just rely on goodwill or hoping for the best.
That's exactly it. And one of the key ideas they propose is something called appropriate water pricing.
Okay, break that down for me.
Well, it's basically about encouraging people to use water more responsibly by putting a real price tag on it.
So kind of like when you see your electricity bill and it shows you exactly how much those late-night Netflix binges are costing you.
Exactly. It makes you think twice. Right.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's not about punishing people. It's about generating the funds needed to protect natural water sources, invest in infrastructure, and make the whole system more efficient.
Right. Got to pay for those upgrades somehow.
And it also means making sure that the pricing is fair and transparent so that everyone contributes in a way that's equitable and that no one group is unfairly burdened.
You know, that reminds me of something I read about Cape Town, South Africa.
Oh, yeah. What about it?
Well, a few years ago, they were facing a really severe water crisis. They were on the verge of what they called day zero.
Wow, day zero. That sounds serious.
It was. It basically meant they were about to run out of water completely.
I remember hearing about that. It was all over the news.
Yeah, and they ended up having to implement some pretty drastic water restrictions and pricing changes.
I bet that wasn't very popular.
It wasn't at first, but it actually worked. People changed their behavior, and they were able to avert disaster.
It's a great example of how powerful those kinds of economic incentives can be, even when we're dealing with something as essential as water.
Yeah, it really shows that individual actions, when taken collectively, can have a huge impact.
Absolutely, and it ties back into that whole idea of shared responsibility that we were discussing earlier. We all have a role to play.
All right, so we've got the water pricing piece of the puzzle. What other funding mechanisms are they looking at?
Another big idea is this concept of public-private governance at the basin level.
Public-private partnerships, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's essentially about moving away from these fragmented systems where different agencies and stakeholders are all working in isolation.
So instead of everyone doing their own thing, they're trying to get all the key players on the same page.
Exactly, and this approach is about creating more integrated, collaborative decision-making.
And by basin level, they mean managing water resources within specific river basins, right?
Precisely. So everyone from government agencies to private companies to local communities are all working together to manage that particular water source.
So it's about getting everyone who has a stake in that water to have a seat at the table.
And hopefully this approach could attract more investment too.
Yeah, more investment is always a good thing.
Especially when we're talking about these large-scale, long-term projects.
But it also sounds like it requires a pretty significant shift from the way things are currently done.
It does, and the report also emphasizes the need to revise those existing regulatory frameworks to fit these new collaborative approaches.
So they're not just talking about changing the way water is managed. They're talking about overhauling the entire system.
They're aiming for systemic change, which is ambitious, but definitely necessary.
So we've got pricing reforms, we've got this collaborative governance model, and a big regulatory makeover, Anything else on the to-do list when it comes to funding?
Yeah, there's one more crucial point they emphasize.
Oh, what's that?
It's the social impact of all these changes.
So making sure that the solutions don't just work on paper, but actually benefit people on the ground.
Exactly. The report stresses that these new funding mechanisms need to be designed through open dialogue and careful consideration of the needs of local communities, various organizations, and experts.
So it's not just about throwing money at the problem, it's about making sure that the solutions are equitable and sustainable in the long run.
It's about doing it right, not just doing it fast.
Like that saying, measure twice, cut once.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And it brings us back to that core principle of security with everyone.
Right, it's not just a catchy slogan, it's woven into every aspect of this plan.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the things that makes this plan so compelling. They're not just trying to patch things up, they're really trying to get it right.
Yeah, it's clear they've put a lot of thought into this.
And while the financial side is obviously crucial, it's also important to remember that it's not the only thing that matters.
Ultimately, it comes down to people, right?
Absolutely. It's about ensuring that everyone has access to this vital resource, both now and in the future.
Okay, so we've covered the funding side of things. What are some of the key takeaways for our listener? What really stood out to you from all of this?
Well, for me, what's most striking is that Chile is completely rethinking how they manage water as a country.
There's a paradigm shift.
Exactly. They're moving away from seeing water as something to be exploited and towards recognizing it as this precious resource that needs careful stewardship.
It's like they've finally woken up to the fact that water isn't just something you turn on and off with a tap.
It's a complex system that's interconnected with everything, the economy, the environment, people's lives, everything.
And they're actually reflecting that interconnectedness in their approach, looking not just at infrastructure, but at the economic, social, and environmental implications. That's what true sustainability is all about.
Couldn't agree more.
It's not just a blueprint for Chile, it's a potential model for water management in the 21st century. I mean, that's pretty exciting stuff.
It really is, and it's important to remember that this isn't just a government initiative.
It's a collective effort.
Exactly. They're emphasizing that everyone has a role to play, from businesses to communities to individuals.
So it's not just about what the government does, it's about what we do too. And that brings us to a really important question for you, the listener. Chile's plan seems incredibly thorough. What lessons could other countries, facing similar challenges, learn from their approach? Could any of these strategies be applied locally wherever you are in the world?
That's a great question. I think the key takeaway that we can all apply no matter where we are is that shift from simply using water to actually valuing it. Like it's a vital resource.
Yeah, it's like almost a mindset shift, isn't it?
It is.
Thinking about how we can all be more conscious of our own water footprint. What can we do as individuals, to contribute to a more sustainable future?
There's actually so much we can do. Even small changes can make a big difference in the long run, like taking shorter showers.
Oh yeah, guilty as charged on that one.
Or even fixing those leaky faucets.
Oh, that's a good one.
Choosing water-efficient appliances, too, when it's time to replace them.
And thinking about, the water footprint of the things we buy, like choosing products that require less water to produce.
Exactly. Every choice we make has an impact, and being more aware of our water footprint is a huge step in the right direction.
Yeah, it's about connecting those dots between our actions and the impact they have on this incredibly precious resource.
Absolutely. The more we understand about where our water comes from and how it's managed, the better equipped we are to make informed choices that benefit both ourselves and the planet.
This deep dive has certainly made me think about my own water usage in a whole new light, that's for sure. It's easy to take water for granted, especially when you live in a place where it seems plentiful.
Oh, I totally get it.
But it's a good reminder that it's a finite resource, and we all need to be doing our part to protect it.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, thanks for joining us on this journey to Chile. We've explored their ambitious plan, the financial hurdles they face, and most importantly, the role we can all play in creating a more sustainable water future.
It's been a fascinating deep dive, that's for sure.
I hope you're leaving with a sense of informed optimism about the future of water, just as we are. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.